Hey guys, welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Ted, and today I'm hanging out with
Nerdy Steve.
Nathan Nerdark.
And you got role-playing in my board game.
God damn it, Ted, you got board game in my role-playing.
Don't worry, guys. We can use both.
Jump down to the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy the newsletter. It's a great way to get gaming tips as well as learn how to game with us.
Now, by now, you got to be wondering why we've stacked up the Betrayer on the House of the Hill.
And
I'm wondering. You guys got to tell me, what are we doing this stuff?
all right, so I had this idea inspired by recently I've been reading the Triniton, the RPG book for the game Triniton, and they have a card game in their game. And I said, well, I know Ted did a cool thing with using Betrayal House on the Hill, the actual tiles, for a mansion dungeon.
Right.
So it's like, well, what other games can we put in a game, or are there like basically that style of the riddle of the Sphinx and things like?
Well, I think off camera you described this as a way, or is there a way to put card games or board games into your RPG? And I thought it was a really cool idea. There's times that, as a DM, you're looking for something new, you're looking for something interesting to spice up your typical tabletop action. And I think that it was a way to say, okay, well, if I come up with a puzzle or I come up with some problem that the PCs need to solve, you could literally take a break from the game or just kind of shove everything aside and pull out a board game, a card game that you have set up or prepared to be able to say, well, you need to beat this in order to get out of the dungeon or to solve this puzzle.
So the kind of like the challenging part for the players and the fun part would be to try and do it and maintain the role-playing.
Yes.
So, like, it's not Dave, Ted, and Nate playing the game, but it's Ranthar the Wizard and Gorak the Barbarian, Tika the Rogue. Trying to get into the head of those characters and how they would play the game and use it. And you could even just incorporate a portion of the game or the whole game, whatever works for your session. You might not be interested in sacking out your whole night of gaming to play a board game. Some players might be okay with it and others may not. So you might want to just steal portions of it and maybe like taking snapshots of the game and incorporating it into your gameplay, and maybe at different areas as well. That would be one way of just like inserting a game into the game. Then there is the other, which gets used in Triniton, and we discussed it during the review, is where they actually take the deck of cards and they create games that are like a mishmash of memory or war. Solitaire. And you have to play the game and beat the game in order to solve a puzzle or do something in the game world, and this is kind of like your way of affecting it.
I mean, you could do something as simple as a deck of cards or a memory, and if you fail to make a match, you take damage.
Well, you take damage, or something negative happens, or a setback in the game.
The timer goes down.
Yeah, and that could be a representation of some kind of psychic entity's attack on you. It's memory based what you're doing, or you're trying to like escape some kind of dream world imprisonment or something, and you're trying to recapture your memories, and you're playing the game memory out of game, but it gives you that kind of like that linkage of in and out of game concepts.
Yeah, like you reskin it in the game. So like say you have a memory deck, right? Even better if you could actually find something that's themed thematically towards what you're doing. I'm sure it's got to be out there somewhere, right? And in the game, what your physical game is representing is in the game where the players come upon this crystal cavern, and floating all around this crystal cavern are these crystals, and they have images flickering through them, and you're trying to capture the right ones in the right sequence in order to either, whether it's move on to the next phase of the dungeon, maybe it was a trap and you're now sealed in, or you need to get a piece of information, equipment, magic item, and the only way to have it revealed is overcoming this obstacle, right? So it becomes a out of game physical representation of something in the game. And it gives you a way to play it, and then everybody can kind of participate, and then you could even dial it back to your characters and go, okay, what kind of stats do they have? What kind of skills do they have? Does it give some kind of advantage, or like almost like a cheat in the actual game,
Yeah.
because your character is drawing on things that you as a person might not have to draw upon.
Yeah, is this game similar enough to a real card game that if you had some skill at some kind of gambling or sleight of hand, that you could cheat at it in a sense?
Yeah, or perhaps your character is skilled in certain knowledges that would pertain to that, those circumstances. And then the other idea is that we kind of touched on was Ted actually took pieces from the game, Betrayer House on the Hill, and created a dungeon from it. He used he's done several things. I think you've used it in several different ways, right? You've run it twice now or 3 times, and you've done it different each time?
Correct. The Betrayal House on the Hill, fantastic game. If you've never played it, it's great. I've always called it just horror movie, the board game, because the premise is you walk into a house. No premise. You go into the house. That's how it starts, and the door locks behind you. You need to get out. So I've used the tiles that are in the game because they're set to randomly figure out what is the house based off of what floor is written on the back of the card, and then the front of the cards are just room tiles, and it tells you what's there. So you could literally use these to make your dungeon as you're going, and you could have it set up that you know what it's like, or you could have it, as I did for the first time, completely and utterly random.
Diablo style.
Yes, Diablo style, or the original Diablo anyway. And the players got to investigate the house that they were investigating based off of what tile got flipped, and I had rooms that they were looking for, so as they were investigating, they were looking for specific locales that I had set up. So the longer it took for them to find it, the longer it actually physically took them to find it. Now, when I played it the second time, I was like, well, taking the feedback from the players, I streamlined the process to say, okay, well, I'm going to set it up in a way that I have the rooms set up the way I want them. And then the third time I ran it, I just had a layout, and this was how things were. But I used the premise for all 3 of them, that they got to the location, and that's what it was.
Yeah, and you could even have done a 4th way, which is to literally use the tiles the same way the board game uses the tiles, and then you put the minis right on them. Sure, it's not spatially correct, but it just gives like a representation.
Right.
Another mechanic that I like from this game that you could use to create some kind of level of dread or anxiety is there's a rolling for what's called the haunt, which is where the bad thing happens. So you could say that you have certain things in either a dungeon or a scenario, or even a diplomatic situation where you're trying to calm an angry dragon or something. And if you've done certain things, that's going to add to the bad roll that you have to make. And then if you get over a certain score, then that's when the dragon is like, all right, I've had enough of your excuses. You've stolen my stuff. I'm going to eat you and burn you.
And going along with this, another mechanic we've seen that has been used in other games is the dread mechanic, and it's literally just a Jenga table or a Jenga tower that players are pulling from, and when the tower finally topples, something bad's going to happen. So these are several different instances of just literally taking game pieces from another game to introduce into your game as representatives, or just a cool tactile thing for your players to interact with, or taking actual mechanics from the game to introduce into your game, or actually literally putting the game in part or in whole into the game to add to it. I will say the key to doing any of this is making sure all the players can interact with it and enjoy it, so you don't have... You never want to... Like, we were talking off camera, and we were like, oh, you pull out a chessboard and play chess. But in theory, you really wouldn't want to do that.
No.
Because that means 2 people are playing a game and everyone else is watching.
Now, if it was more like that, the Harry Potter scene where they have the wizard's chest where you're the actual pieces, that might be a little bit more interesting, but at the same time, it's got to be a little more sped up than a game of chess, because that's just too long, I think, to bog down a game.
And I was going to say, if you're playing a game of chess, I, as the dungeon master, would never do that, because both of you are better at chess than I am. So it would be pointless for me to be like, how about the 2 of you guys team up and take on me, unless I have... Let's add it, get another addition, Nightmare Chess, where I can do these kind of things that you can't.
Right, or, you make up, like, a chess game, like, from Like the Star Trek where you've seen it and it's like these multi-level
the
things.
tri-dimensional.
Yeah, where you can actually have all the players at the same time interacting. For me, the most important part is actually having everybody at the table be involved. Yeah, I don't want to create a situation where some of the people are just watching. That's not going to be any fun for anybody.
Right.
Where you have the Gandalf of the group sitting down and trying to remember the password or figure out some kind of mathematical formula to, oh yeah, we should go this way. They're like, okay, well that was 3 hours of us sitting and watching you.
In the comments below, let us know what different things you've used to incorporate into your role-playing games that maybe weren't part of the game before, perhaps part of another game. While you're at it, like, share, and subscribe.
Check us out over at nerdarchy.com.
You can hang out with us over on Facebook.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.